There comes a moment in life when exhaustion stops feeling temporary. It becomes your identity. You wake up tired. You rush through mornings that never feel like yours. You answer messages before you answer your own thoughts. You trade hours for money, energy for survival, attention for approval, day after day, month after month, year after year. And somewhere deep inside, a question begins to grow louder. Is this really what life is supposed to be? Not because you're lazy, not because you're weak, but because your soul can feel the difference between building a life and endlessly maintaining one. Most people never say this out loud. They smile in meetings while silently breaking inside. They celebrate promotions that secretly steal the rest of their freedom. They buy distractions because they no longer remember what peace feels like. And the dangerous part is this. The system rewards this behavior. It teaches people to admire burnout, to glorify exhaustion, to mistake constant movement for meaningful progress. But movement is not freedom. Being busy is not the same thing as building wealth. And in this audiobook, Wealth Escape Plan, you are going to discover the difference. Not through fantasy, not through empty motivation, not through overnight success lies designed to sell desperate people a shortcut. This audiobook is about something deeper, something more dangerous, something most people avoid their entire lives. Leverage, freedom, ownership, the ability to stop selling your existence 1 hour at a time. Over the next chapters, you will discover why most people stay financially trapped even while working harder every year. You will learn why discipline matters more than motivation, why attention has become the most expensive currency on earth, and why modern wealth is no longer built with muscles alone, but with systems, positioning, emotional control, and strategic patience. You will understand how ordinary people quietly escape survival mode, while others remain stuck in cycles that never end. You will learn why some people work for decades and never feel secure, while others build assets that continue working while they sleep. And most importantly, you will begin to see money differently, not as something to chase, but as something that flows toward value, clarity, patience, and structure. This is educational content, not financial advice. This audiobook is about awareness, psychology, discipline, and modern wealth-building principles designed to help you think differently in a distracted world. And here's a sentence I want you to remember before we go any further. The goal is not to become rich enough to escape work. The goal is to become free enough to choose your work. Read that again in your mind, because if that line hits you deeply, then you're already beginning to wake up. And if you're listening right now while feeling exhausted, uncertain, overwhelmed, or stuck, understand this clearly. Your life is not over. You are not behind forever. But you do need a different map, because the old map leads to one destination: burnout disguised as success. And before we talk about wealth, before we talk about investing, before we talk about systems, we need to confront the invisible prison almost everyone lives inside without realizing it, because the first step toward freedom is seeing the cage. Chapter 1. The salary trap nobody warned you about. Most people think the problem is that they don't earn enough money. But that is rarely the real problem. The real problem is dependency. Dependency creates fear. Fear destroys courage. And without courage, people stay loyal to lives they secretly hate. Think about how society trains people from childhood. Study hard, get good grades, Find stable work. Stay safe. Don't take risks. Be realistic. At first, that advice sounds responsible until you realize what it actually creates. A person who depends entirely on external permission to survive. A person whose entire life can collapse because another human being decides they are no longer needed. That is not security. That is controlled vulnerability. And the system becomes even more dangerous because it rewards short-term comfort. Every 2 weeks, money arrives. Bills get paid. Dopamine returns. The cycle continues. People confuse predictability with freedom. But there is a massive difference between stable income and independent income. One disappears if you stop working. The other continues because systems, assets, or ownership structures continue producing value without constant physical effort. Now listen carefully. There is nothing wrong with having a job. The danger is having no escape plan beyond it, because the modern world is changing faster than most people emotionally understand. Artificial intelligence is replacing repetitive tasks. Algorithms are replacing middle layers. Entire industries are transforming in real time. And the people who survive this shift will not simply be the hardest workers. They will be the most adaptable builders. The people who understand leverage. A decade ago, one person with a smartphone could not build a global audience from a bedroom. Today, they can. A decade ago, someone needed massive capital to launch a business. Today, software, automation, and digital systems allow individuals to operate like entire companies. The game changed, but most minds didn't. Most people are still operating with industrial age thinking inside a digital age economy, and that creates suffering. Because modern wealth increasingly belongs to people who learn how to multiply effort instead of endlessly repeating it. Think about the difference between carrying water by hand and building a pipeline. One requires constant labor, the other creates flow. That is what systems do. Systems turn effort into continuity, and continuity is where freedom begins. But most people never reach this understanding because they are too exhausted surviving the present to design the future. That is the trap. The paycheck becomes psychological sedation, enough comfort to survive, not enough freedom to escape. And eventually people stop dreaming altogether. They stop imagining different possibilities because disappointment trained them to lower expectations. But something inside you refused to completely die. That's why you're here. Some part of you still believes life can become larger than survival. Protect that part of yourself, because the world constantly tries to shrink human beings into predictable patterns. Wake up, consume, work, recover, repeat. And if you never interrupt the pattern, decades disappear faster than you think. One day becomes 1 week. 1 week becomes 1 year. 1 year becomes a life you barely remember choosing. That is why awareness matters. You cannot escape a trap you refuse to identify. Now here's where everything begins to shift. Wealth is not only about money. Real wealth is control over your time, control over your attention, control over your environment, control over your emotional state. Because a millionaire addicted to chaos is still trapped. A wealthy person without peace is still poor in ways that matter deeply. And this is where the modern conversation around money becomes dangerously incomplete. People chase income while neglecting capacity. But your ability to hold wealth emotionally matters just as much as your ability to create it financially. That's why so many people sabotage themselves after success. They build external wealth without internal structure, no discipline, no clarity, no emotional regulation. So when pressure arrives, everything collapses. The wealth escape plan is different. This is not just about increasing income. It's about becoming the kind of person capable of sustaining freedom. And that transformation starts with one brutal realization. Nobody is coming to rescue your future. Not the government, not motivation, not luck, not perfect timing. You must become intentional. You must become aware of where your life energy is going every single day. Because attention is the foundation of wealth now. Where attention goes, energy flows. Where energy flows, results grow. Most people leak attention constantly. Notifications, drama, scrolling, comparison, entertainment addiction, emotional chaos. Then they wonder why they feel powerless. A distracted mind cannot build freedom. And the people who control their attention will increasingly control their future. This is why the richest people on earth fight for human attention more aggressively than oil companies once fought for land. Because attention creates behavior. Behavior creates habits. Habits create outcomes. Outcomes create lives. So before you become financially wealthy, you must become mentally difficult to control. That is where the escape truly starts. And in the next chapter, we are going to talk about the silent addiction, keeping millions trapped in modern poverty without even realizing it. Not lack of intelligence, not lack of opportunity, something far more invisible. Comfort. Dear viewer, we now have over 150 videos on our channel. That's a huge number, and we want to thank you, our viewers and subscribers, so much for that. You inspire us to create great videos every time and choose the best topics for our audiobooks. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to do so. We have big plans for this channel. Thank you. Chapter 2. Comfort is the most expensive addiction in the world. Nobody talks about this honestly because comfort feels harmless. It doesn't arrive looking dangerous. It arrives softly. A little more sleep, a little less effort, a little distraction after work, a little scrolling to relax, a little avoidance, a little delay, and slowly your standards begin to die quietly. That's how most dreams disappear, not through catastrophe, through gradual surrender. Comfort is seductive because it removes tension temporarily. But temporary relief often creates permanent stagnation. And the modern world is engineered to keep you comfortably distracted. Think about it. Never in human history has distraction been this accessible. Endless entertainment, infinite scrolling, instant dopamine, algorithmic stimulation 24 hours a day. People no longer sit alone with their thoughts. They anesthetize themselves instead. The moment discomfort appears, they reach for stimulation, phone, food, streaming, noise, validation, shopping, escapism, anything except silence. Because silence forces confrontation. Silence reveals the truth people spend years trying to outrun, that they are living beneath their potential, and that realization hurts. So most people stay distracted long enough to avoid changing. But here's the terrifying part. The world rewards passive consumption while punishing deep focus. If someone spends 6 hours mindlessly scrolling, nobody intervenes. But try isolating yourself to build something meaningful for 6 months, and suddenly people question your obsession. Because average behavior always tries to recruit company. Misery loves normalization. And that's why escaping financially often requires escaping psychologically first. You must become comfortable being misunderstood. You must stop needing immediate rewards. You must train yourself to tolerate the invisible phase where nothing appears to be happening. Because wealth is built in delayed visibility. Nobody sees the discipline before the result. Nobody applauds the quiet nights, the lonely mornings, the repeated sacrifices, the boring consistency. They only notice success after it becomes impossible to ignore. And by then, they call it luck. But luck rarely explains sustained freedom. Patterns do, systems do, habits do, and discipline does. Now let me tell you something most people never fully understand. Your future is hidden inside your daily routines, not your goals, not your intentions, not your motivational speeches, your routines. Because repetition becomes identity. The person who studies 1 hour every day eventually becomes knowledgeable. The person who saves consistently eventually gains leverage. The person who builds patiently eventually creates options. Meanwhile, the person who constantly escapes discomfort eventually loses resilience. And resilience is now one of the most valuable traits on earth because modern society conditions emotional weakness. People panic quickly, quit quickly, react emotionally, need constant stimulation, need constant reassurance. But wealth building requires emotional endurance. You must survive uncertainty longer than average people can emotionally tolerate. That is the real advantage, not genius. Endurance. Can you stay focused when results are invisible? Can you continue learning when nobody praises you? Can you stay disciplined when comfort invites you backward? That determines more than talent ever will. There are people with extraordinary intelligence destroying their future every day because they lack emotional control. And there are ordinary individuals quietly becoming wealthy because they learned consistency. One controlled hour daily becomes a different life after 5 years. Most people underestimate compounding because they only respect dramatic change. But life rarely transforms dramatically overnight. It transforms quietly, then suddenly, like water heating before it boils. Nothing appears different for a long time. Then everything changes at once. That's how financial freedom often happens too. At first, the effort feels invisible. You learn skills, you study, you save, you invest, you build systems, you improve discipline. And externally, almost nothing changes. This is where most people quit. Because the beginning of transformation is psychologically uncomfortable. You work without applause, without certainty, without proof. But eventually, the compound effect arrives. Your thinking sharpens. Your income diversifies. Your confidence deepens. Your options expand. Your stress decreases. Your identity changes. And one day, people look at your life and assume it happened quickly. They didn't see the years spent becoming someone capable of creating it. That invisible period matters. Protect it. Now listen carefully to this next truth, because it may completely change the way you see wealth. Financial freedom is less about making more money and more about requiring less external control. Read that slowly in your mind. Most people increase income while simultaneously increasing dependency. Bigger apartment, bigger car payment, more subscriptions, more lifestyle inflation, more obligations. So even when income rises, freedom doesn't. They're earning more, but trapped harder. That is not wealth. That is upgraded pressure. Real wealth creates breathing room. It creates optionality. The ability to say no. The ability to rest. The ability to think clearly. The ability to walk away from environments destroying your spirit. And optionality is one of the highest forms of power, because desperation makes people tolerate almost anything. Bad jobs, bad relationships, bad treatment, bad environments. When survival controls someone emotionally, freedom becomes difficult to access mentally. That's why building wealth is also about reclaiming dignity, not ego. Dignity, the ability to make decisions from alignment instead of panic. But to reach that level, you must stop worshiping comfort. You must stop asking, quote one, and start asking, quote two. That question changes lives, because most people optimize for immediate emotional relief instead of long-term empowerment. And modern algorithms exploit that weakness constantly. They monetize distraction, monetize outrage, monetize insecurity, monetize comparison. The average person now consumes more information in one day than previous generations consumed in weeks. Yet many feel more confused than ever, because information without reflection becomes noise, and noise destroys clarity. That's why wealthy thinkers protect their mental environment aggressively. They understand something most people ignore. A distracted mind cannot build an intentional future. If your attention belongs to everyone else, your future eventually will too. So the wealth escape plan begins with reclaiming your mind, not with money, because money amplifies identity. If you are chaotic with little money, you often become chaotic with more. If you are disciplined with little money, you become dangerous with leverage. And this is where your transformation truly starts. Not when you make your first million, but when you stop needing external stimulation to feel alive. That is power. Can you sit alone and build? Can you focus without validation? Can you continue without applause? Can you delay gratification long enough to change your entire bloodline? Because that's what real wealth building often requires, not perfection, maturity. The maturity to choose long-term peace over short-term pleasure. And here's something most people never hear. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. That's why motivation alone fails. Motivation is emotional weather. Systems are architecture. One disappears when feelings change. The other continues functioning regardless. So if your future depends only on feeling inspired, eventually you will stop. But if your life is structured correctly, progress continues even during difficult seasons. That's the difference between amateurs and builders. Builders create environments that support discipline. They reduce friction, automate positive behaviors, limit distractions, protect focus, track progress, simplify decisions, because they understand something deeply. Willpower is unreliable. Systems scale. And once you truly understand this, your relationship with work changes forever. You stop asking how to work harder. You start asking how to build smarter, how to create assets, how to develop leverage, how to make effort repeatable instead of temporary. That is where modern wealth begins, not in hype, in design. And in the next chapter, we are going to uncover one of the biggest lies people are taught about money from childhood. A lie so normalized that millions build their entire lives around it, only to realize decades later they were climbing the wrong mountain. Chapter 3. The biggest financial lie ever sold. Most people spend their entire lives chasing security, without realizing the version of security they were taught is the very thing keeping them trapped. From childhood, people are conditioned to believe one sentence without questioning it. Work hard for 40 years and eventually you'll be free. But pause for a moment and really think about what that means. 40 years. 40 years of trading mornings for obligations. 40 years of asking permission to rest. 40 years of compressing your life into weekends and vacations. 40 years of postponing peace until your body is too tired to fully enjoy it. And society calls that normal. But normal does not always mean healthy. Sometimes normal simply means common. There was a time when this path made more sense. One stable career, one predictable economy, one pension, one system that rewarded loyalty long-term. That world is disappearing. Today, industries evolve faster than people emotionally adapt. Technology shifts markets overnight. Entire careers transform within a few years. Artificial intelligence automates tasks people thought would last forever. Yet millions are still psychologically operating inside an outdated blueprint. And because they never question the blueprint, they never realize why they feel trapped even while doing everything correctly. Now listen carefully. The problem is not hard work. Hard work matters. The problem is building your entire life around linear effort. Linear effort means your income depends entirely on continued labor. No leverage, no assets, no ownership, no scalable systems, just constant exertion. And here's why this becomes dangerous. Human energy is finite. Your attention is finite. Your emotional capacity is finite. Your physical stamina is finite. But systems can scale infinitely compared to human labor alone. That's why a person with leverage often outpaces people working 10 times harder. Because leverage multiplies output. One video can reach millions. One piece of software can serve entire countries. One investment can grow while you sleep. One system can continue operating without constant supervision. This is why modern wealth increasingly belongs to creators, builders, owners, and strategic operators, not merely workers. And again, there is dignity in work, but there is danger in dependency, especially if dependency becomes permanent. Now here's where many people misunderstand wealth building completely. They think becoming wealthy requires becoming obsessed with money. But the people who build lasting freedom are usually obsessed with something deeper: value. They solve problems, create systems, develop rare skills, build trust, understand human behavior, learn patience, master emotional control. Money often follows those things, not instantly, but eventually. And here's another truth. Society rarely explains honestly. The economy rewards usefulness far more than effort. Someone digging holes manually all day may work harder physically than a software engineer who creates one scalable application used by millions. But effort alone does not determine value in modern economies. Impact does. Reach does. Scalability does. Positioning does. This realization changes everything, because once you understand that income is often tied to value multiplied by leverage, you stop viewing your future through the lens of exhaustion alone. You begin asking different questions. How can I create something once that continues producing value? How can I develop skills that scale digitally? How can I make my effort repeatable? How can I build ownership instead of dependency? These questions move people toward freedom, and freedom begins mentally before it appears financially. Now let me tell you about one of the greatest traps in modern culture: performative success. People buy lifestyles they cannot afford to impress people they secretly resent. Cars they barely enjoy, clothes purchased for validation, apartments rented for appearance, vacations experienced through phone cameras instead of presence. And beneath it all, anxiety. Because image-driven living creates invisible financial slavery. People become prisoners of maintaining appearances. They stop making decisions based on alignment and start making decisions based on social perception. This is why some high earners remain financially fragile, because external success does not equal internal stability. Real wealth is quieter than social media teaches. Often slower too. It looks like discipline, patience, ownership, long-term thinking, strategic restraint. And restraint is difficult in a world designed to stimulate endless desire. Every advertisement whispers the same message: you are incomplete until you buy more. But wealthy thinking asks a different question. What actually improves my freedom? That question eliminates enormous amounts of unnecessary consumption, because not everything expensive is valuable, and not everything valuable is visible. Some of the highest return investments never appear impressive publicly. Books, skills, health, focus, emotional intelligence, relationships, time ownership, self-discipline, those assets compound invisibly before they compound financially. That's why true wealth building often feels boring to people addicted to stimulation. It's repetitive, measured, patient. And patience is becoming rare. People want outcomes immediately now. Immediate money, immediate transformation, immediate validation. But nature itself does not operate that way. Trees grow slowly before they stand tall. Muscles strengthen through repeated resistance. Trust builds over time. Mastery develops through repetition. And wealth often follows the same laws. Slow roots, strong foundation, delayed harvest. But because people only celebrate visible success, they abandon invisible growth too early. They quit before compounding begins. This is one of the greatest tragedies in modern life. People underestimate what consistency can do over 5 or 10 years because they are obsessed with immediate emotional results. Yet, nearly every meaningful transformation in life requires surviving long periods where progress feels invisible. And this is where emotional discipline becomes a financial advantage. Can you stay committed without immediate evidence? Can you continue building when nobody notices? Can you remain focused while others chase constant entertainment? That ability separates builders from consumers. Now here's something important. The wealth escape plan is not about escaping effort entirely. Anyone promising effortless wealth is usually selling fantasy. Instead, this is about redirecting effort toward assets instead of endless transactions, toward ownership instead of dependency, toward systems instead of survival cycles. And there is another reason this matters deeply. Your life energy is sacred. Every hour matters. Every year matters. And many people only realize this after burnout forces awareness upon them. Health declines. Relationships weaken. Meaning disappears. And suddenly, they realize they traded their entire youth for obligations they never consciously chose. Do not wait for collapse before reevaluating your direction. Awareness now can save decades later. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If you never intentionally design your life, society will design it for you. Algorithms will shape your attention. Employers will shape your schedule. Consumer culture will shape your desires, until one day you wake up living a script you never consciously wrote. That is why intentionality matters. Wealth is not just financial architecture, it is life architecture. How you spend your mornings, what influences your thinking, who surrounds your energy, what habits shape your identity, what future your daily actions are quietly constructing. Everything compounds. And if this realization feels heavy, good. Because awakening often feels uncomfortable before it feels empowering. The illusion must crack before clarity enters. Now, I want you to think about something honestly. How much of your life currently belongs to you? Not theoretically, actually. How much uninterrupted time belongs to your mind, your growth, your peace, your vision? Most people have never seriously asked themselves that question because deep down, they fear the answer. But the people who reclaim their lives financially first reclaim them mentally. They stop drifting. They stop consuming endlessly. They stop reacting emotionally to everything. They stop surrendering attention carelessly. And gradually, their identity changes. They become more intentional, more disciplined, more emotionally stable, more future-focused, and eventually, more free. But before freedom becomes external, something else must happen internally. You must stop thinking like a consumer and start thinking like a creator, because creators build leverage. Consumers feed leverage to others. And in the next chapter, we're going to uncover the psychological difference between those two mindsets, because this single shift changes how you see money, time, technology, opportunity, and your entire future. Hey there. We want to remind you that we often choose topics suggested by you, our viewers, in the comments. In the comments, you can suggest a topic or ask a question about what you'd like to see in our video. We read every comment carefully, so we promise not to miss a single one. Thank you. Let's keep going. Chapter 4. Consumers spend, creators build. This is where the entire game begins to change. Most people move through life consuming far more than they create. They consume content, consume opinions, consume entertainment, consume outrage, consume trends, consume distractions. And slowly, without realizing it, they become passive participants in their own existence, reactive instead of intentional. The modern economy thrives on this because distracted consumers are profitable. The longer people who stay emotionally reactive, financially impulsive, and mentally unfocused, the easier they are to influence. That's why attention is now one of the most valuable resources on earth. Every company wants it. Every platform competes for it. Every algorithm is designed to capture it. And here's the dangerous part. Whatever captures your attention eventually shapes your identity. If you constantly consume fear, you become anxious. If you constantly consume comparison, you become insecure. If you constantly consume noise, your thinking weakens. But creators operate differently. Creators direct energy outward intentionally. They build, design, write, solve, develop, strategize, produce. And because they create value instead of endlessly consuming stimulation, they begin accumulating leverage. This is why creators often gain freedom while consumers remain trapped in cycles of dependency. Now, understand this carefully. You do not need millions of followers to become a creator. Creation is not limited to social media. A creator is anyone who produces value intentionally, someone who builds a skill, creates a service, designs a system, develops knowledge, solves problems, improves environments, generates ideas. Creation is an energy state. And once you enter it consistently, your relationship with life changes dramatically. Because creation builds confidence differently than consumption ever can. Consumption creates temporary emotional stimulation. Creation creates internal evidence, evidence that you are capable, evidence that you can shape reality, evidence that your effort can become something tangible. And that evidence matters deeply, especially in a world where many people secretly feel powerless. Now let me ask you something uncomfortable. How much of your daily life is creation and how much is consumption? Be honest. How many hours disappear into passive scrolling? How much emotional energy gets wasted reacting to people you'll never meet? How many dreams remain undeveloped because entertainment became easier than discipline? This isn't judgment, it's awareness. Because awareness creates choice, and choice creates transformation. The truth is, most people are not lazy in the traditional sense. They're overstimulated, their dopamine systems are exhausted, their focus is fragmented, their minds are overloaded with input. So deep work begins feeling emotionally difficult. And deep work is where wealth is often born. Not shallow attention, depth. The ability to focus uninterrupted long enough to produce meaningful value. This is becoming increasingly rare, and rare skills become valuable. Think about modern society carefully. Most people cannot sit quietly for 30 minutes without checking their phone. Most people cannot focus deeply without reaching for stimulation. Most people cannot delay gratification consistently. So, if you develop focus in a distracted world, you already possess an enormous advantage. Focus is leverage now. Emotional control is leverage now. Consistency is leverage now. Because the modern economy rewards people who can sustain attention while others remain fragmented. And this becomes even more powerful when combined with technology. A focused individual today can build things previous generations could barely imagine. A single person can launch digital businesses from a laptop, build educational platforms, create automated systems, invest globally, reach international audiences, develop scalable products. The barriers have changed, but many minds haven't. People still think wealth belongs only to the privileged few. And yes, inequality exists. Advantages exist. Some people absolutely begin further ahead. But that truth should create awareness, not surrender. Because while you cannot control every circumstance, you can control your response to reality. You can control whether you remain passive or become intentional. And intentional people eventually separate themselves from drift. Now here's another shift most people never make. Consumers ask, quote, 7 creators ask, quote, 8. That difference sounds simple, but it changes financial destiny because consumers spend energy maintaining lifestyles. Creators spend energy expanding capability. One becomes increasingly dependent. The other becomes increasingly adaptable. And adaptability matters more than ever now. The world no longer rewards static thinking long term. Technology changes too quickly. Markets shift too quickly. Opportunities evolve too quickly. The people who thrive are learners, not know-it-alls. Learners, people willing to evolve repeatedly without ego. This is another reason many intelligent people remain financially stuck. They become emotionally attached to old identities, old careers, old systems, old assumptions. Meanwhile, adaptable people pivot, they study, experiment, adjust, improve, and over time, flexibility becomes a superpower. Now here's something deeply important. You do not need to escape your current life overnight. That mindset destroys people. Many hear conversations about wealth and suddenly want immediate transformation. Quit the job tomorrow. Become rich instantly. Escape responsibility immediately. That emotional impatience often creates chaos instead of freedom. The wealth escape plan is not reckless. It is strategic. You build gradually, intentionally, patiently. You strengthen skills while earning, develop systems while learning, create assets while surviving. You build bridges before burning old foundations. That maturity matters because real wealth building is less emotional than social media makes it appear. Online culture glorifies dramatic success stories, but sustainable freedom usually grows through quiet consistency, daily improvement, controlled risk, strategic decisions. Long-term thinking has become rare because modern culture trains short-term emotional behavior. People want immediate pleasure constantly, immediate validation, immediate entertainment, immediate certainty. But wealth often belongs to those willing to sacrifice short-term emotional comfort for long-term expansion. This applies everywhere: fitness, business, relationships, mental health, financial growth, compounding rewards, patience. And patience requires identity-level discipline. You must become someone who values future peace more than present impulse. That's maturity. Now let me tell you something powerful. The moment you begin creating more than you consume, your life starts changing. Not immediately externally, internally first. You begin feeling sharper, more confident, more focused, more intentional, because creation reconnects human beings to purpose. Deep down, people are not fulfilled by endless consumption. That's why many people feel emotionally empty despite constant entertainment. The human spirit needs progress, needs contribution, needs meaning, needs movement toward something, and creation provides that. This is why building wealth through meaningful value creation feels different than chasing empty status. One nourishes identity, the other drains it. And here's another important truth: money amplifies who you already are. If you are emotionally unstable without money, wealth may intensify that instability. If you are disciplined, grounded, and intentional, leverage magnifies those traits too. That's why internal development matters so much, because freedom without self-control becomes self-destruction. And many people learn this too late. Now think about your future version carefully. Who are you becoming through your current habits? Every day is shaping identity quietly. The books you read, the conversations you tolerate, the environments you normalize, the distractions you repeat, the discipline you avoid, the focus you strengthen. All of it compounds. People often think major life changes happen through giant moments, but usually life changes through repeated small decisions that slowly alter identity. One disciplined hour daily becomes expertise. One repeated investment becomes leverage. One focused project becomes opportunity. One improved habit becomes a transformed life. Never underestimate small, consistent actions. Drops carve stone through repetition. And if this audiobook is resonating with you right now, let that be your sign to stop drifting unconsciously through your future. Maybe this is the moment you begin reclaiming authorship over your life. If a line hit deeply, remember it, write it down, share it with someone who feels trapped in survival mode too. Because sometimes one sentence changes the direction of an entire decade. Now in the next chapter, we are going to talk about something most people misunderstand completely: time. Because wealthy people do not merely have more money, they often relate to time differently than everyone else. And once you understand that shift, you will never look at your schedule the same way again. Chapter 5. Your calendar reveals your future. Most people think wealth is about money management, but long before money becomes a problem, time usually already was. Look carefully at someone's daily schedule, and you can often predict the direction of their entire life. Not perfectly, but patterns reveal destiny more than intentions do. A distracted schedule creates a distracted future. A reactive life creates reactive outcomes. An intentional structure creates momentum. And here's what most people never realize. Time is not merely passing. Time is translating. Every day converts your attention into identity. Whatever repeatedly receives your energy begins shaping who you become. That means your future is not arriving someday. It is being built quietly through ordinary Tuesdays, through unnoticed mornings, through repeated habits, through invisible routines nobody applauds. That's why wealthy thinkers guard their time differently. Not because they believe they are better than others, but because they understand something painful. Lost money can often be regained. Lost years cannot. And modern society destroys time invisibly. Notifications interrupt focus every few minutes. Meetings consume creative energy. Scrolling steals hours disguised as relaxation. Emotional drama drains mental bandwidth. Constant stimulation fractures deep thinking. Then people wonder why they feel perpetually behind. Because fragmented attention creates fragmented lives. Now understand this clearly. The wealth escape plan is not about becoming obsessed with productivity 24 hours a day. That path leads to burnout too. This is about intentionality, knowing where your life energy goes. Because many people are physically exhausted not from meaningful work, but from constant cognitive overload. Too much noise, too much comparison, too much reacting, too much digital chaos. And exhausted people struggle to think strategically. That's why reclaiming your schedule matters. Not just financially, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. You need space to think deeply about your life, space to reflect, space to learn, space to create, space to recover, space to imagine a future larger than survival. Most people never build wealth because survival consumes all available mental energy. They wake already overwhelmed. Bills, pressure, stress, urgency, and urgency destroys long-term thinking. That's why financially free people often prioritize reducing chaos before maximizing luxury. Because peace increases clarity, and clarity improves decision-making. Now here's a question that changes lives. What would your schedule look like if you truly respected your future self? Think carefully. Would you still spend hours consuming meaningless content? Would you still delay your health? Would you still tolerate distractions that weaken your focus? Would you still surround yourself with people committed to stagnation? Probably not. Because when people genuinely value their future, their daily behavior changes. This is why discipline is actually a form of self-respect. Not punishment. Respect. The willingness to protect your long-term life from short-term impulses. And once you understand that, consistency becomes easier emotionally. Because you're no longer forcing yourself through life. You're investing in someone important, your future self. Now let me tell you something deeply uncomfortable. Many people say they want freedom, but their habits reveal they want comfort more. And comfort always charges interest later. The extra scrolling, the delayed learning, the avoided conversations, the neglected health, the financial irresponsibility. Small choices accumulate silently. Then, eventually, consequences arrive all at once. That's how life often works. Slow decisions, sudden outcomes. But this law works positively too. One focused hour daily compounds, one disciplined routine compounds. One skill developed consistently compounds. Most people dramatically underestimate the power of consistency because results appear slowly at first. But slow growth is still growth. And sustainable growth matters far more than emotional intensity. Motivation creates beginnings. Structure creates transformation. This is why wealthy people often become obsessed with systems instead of emotions. Systems reduce dependence on mood. A good system keeps functioning even during difficult days. For example, automatic investing removes emotional hesitation. Scheduled learning builds skills consistently. Focused work blocks increase productivity. Healthy routines improve energy predictably. Structure protects progress from emotional instability. And emotional instability is expensive. Financially, mentally, relationally. People lose years reacting emotionally instead of thinking strategically. They panic during uncertainty, spend impulsively during stress, quit too early during discomfort. But builders learn emotional regulation because long-term wealth requires surviving emotional seasons without abandoning direction. Now, here's another major shift. Poor time management is often hidden emotional avoidance. People stay busy constantly because stillness forces confrontation with fear, with dissatisfaction, with unrealized potential. So they remain occupied, scrolling, working endlessly, distracting themselves, anything except sitting honestly with their life. But awareness is the beginning of freedom. You cannot intentionally redesign a life you refuse to examine. That's why solitude matters. Not loneliness, solitude. Moments where external noise disappears long enough for internal truth to emerge. Some of the most important financial decisions people ever make begin in silence, not in noise, because clarity rarely arrives inside chaos. And if you're constantly overstimulated, you may never hear your deeper intuition at all. Now think about this carefully. Many people spend years trying to increase income while never increasing intentionality. So even when they earn more, they remain stressed, remain distracted, remain emotionally reactive. Because external upgrades cannot solve internal disorder. A person with poor discipline earning more money often simply creates more expensive problems. This is why identity matters more than income initially. Who are you becoming while pursuing wealth? More grounded or more anxious? More intentional or more addicted to validation? More disciplined or more emotionally dependent on external approval? Because real wealth should expand your life, not imprison it. And here's something the world rarely says honestly. Many people are not actually chasing wealth. They're chasing relief. Relief from anxiety. Relief from pressure. Relief from survival fear. But money alone cannot permanently solve internal chaos. Only awareness and disciplined living can do that. This is why some wealthy people remain emotionally miserable. They mastered accumulation without mastering themselves. The wealth escape plan requires both external leverage, internal stability, because freedom without peace still feels like captivity. Now let me ask you something important. When was the last time you intentionally sat down and designed your ideal life? Not fantasy, reality. How would you spend your mornings? What kind of work would energize you? How much time would belong to family, health, creativity, learning, stillness? Most people never ask these questions seriously. They inherit lifestyles unconsciously instead, then wonder why fulfillment feels distant. But intentional living changes everything Because once you know what actually matters to you, unnecessary distractions lose power. You stop chasing every trend, stop comparing constantly, stop saying yes to things destroying your energy. Clarity simplifies life, and simplified lives create space for strategic growth. This is why wealthy individuals often become increasingly selective over time. Selective with attention, selective with relationships, selective with commitments, not from arrogance, from understanding. Every yes costs something: time, focus, energy, peace. And once people deeply understand this, their decisions become sharper. Now here's the beautiful part. You do not need to completely transform your life tonight. You simply need to begin reclaiming ownership gradually. One better habit, one focused hour, one intentional financial decision, one reduced distraction, one improved routine. Small changes repeated consistently alter entire futures. Never underestimate momentum. Most people wait for giant breakthroughs while ignoring small disciplines capable of changing everything. But transformation often enters quietly, like dawn, slowly, then suddenly the entire landscape looks different. And in the next chapter, we're going to talk about one of the greatest hidden forces controlling human behavior: fear. Because many people are not financially trapped by lack of opportunity. They're trapped by fear disguised as practicality. And until you understand that fear clearly, freedom will always feel further away than it truly is. If you enjoy these audiobooks and want to support the channel, consider joining our private members community. Members get early access to new audiobooks and exclusive wealth lessons. Chapter 6. Fear makes people choose small lives. Most people don't fail because they lack intelligence. They fail because fear slowly trains them to betray themselves. Not dramatic fear, not movie scene fear, quiet fear, the kind that whispers, "Be realistic. Don't risk too much. What if it doesn't work? What will people think? What if you fail publicly? What if you're not good enough?" And little by little, fear shrinks human potential. People stop trying things they secretly want. Stop exploring possibilities. Stop building dreams larger than survival. Eventually, they become emotionally loyal to limitation. And the most dangerous part is this: fear often disguises itself as responsibility. Someone says they want freedom, but never studies investing because they're underscore quote underscore 15 underscore. Someone dreams of building a business, but never starts because the timing never feels perfect. Someone knows their environment is destroying them, but stays because uncertainty feels terrifying. That isn't practicality. That's fear wearing professional clothes. Now understand something important. Fear itself is not the enemy. Fear is natural. Every meaningful expansion in life triggers uncertainty. The problem begins when fear becomes your decision maker, because fear prioritizes short-term safety over long-term possibility. And if you always obey fear, your world becomes smaller every year. This is why many people secretly feel numb, not because life defeated them completely, but because they abandoned too many parts of themselves trying to avoid discomfort. They traded aliveness for predictability, and eventually predictability became emotional suffocation. Now listen carefully. The wealth escape plan requires calculated courage, not recklessness. Courage, the willingness to move despite uncertainty, because uncertainty is unavoidable in every meaningful transformation. No one feels completely ready before changing their life. No one receives guaranteed outcomes beforehand. No one eliminates all. Fear before taking action. Action creates clarity, not the other way around. And this is where many people stay trapped for decades. They wait to feel confident first. But confidence usually arrives after evidence, after attempts, after failures, after repetition, after surviving discomfort. You build courage by moving through fear repeatedly, not by avoiding it. Now here's something powerful. Fear shrinks when identity expands. When you begin seeing yourself differently, your tolerance for discomfort increases. This is why self-image matters financially. If someone sees themselves as powerless, they avoid responsibility. If someone sees themselves as adaptable, they approach uncertainty differently. Identity shapes action, and action shapes destiny. That's why the people who escape survival mode psychologically often transform internally before externally. Their standards change first. What they tolerate changes. What they believe possible changes. What they expect from themselves changes. And eventually, their reality begins reflecting that internal shift. Now think about this honestly. How many decisions in your life were made from fear instead of alignment? Jobs accepted from fear. Relationships maintained from fear. Dreams abandoned from fear. Silence chosen from fear. Most people don't realize how much fear secretly organizes their existence. Fear of judgment, fear of instability, fear of rejection, fear of looking foolish, fear of being different. But here's the truth nobody says loudly enough. Living against your deeper truth eventually becomes its own form of suffering. You may avoid short-term discomfort, but long-term regret arrives quietly later, and regret is heavy, especially when people realize they spent decades obeying invisible limitations they never consciously questioned. This is why awareness matters so deeply. You must learn to identify whether your decisions come from wisdom or fear, pretending to be wisdom. There is a difference. Wisdom evaluates risk carefully. Fear magnifies danger emotionally. Wisdom asks, quote, 16, fear asks, underscore, quote, underscore, 17, underscore. And avoiding discomfort completely is impossible. Growth itself requires friction. Every meaningful transformation demands temporary instability. Muscles strengthen through resistance. Skills develop through repetition. Businesses grow through uncertainty. Confidence emerges through experience. Nothing meaningful develops without discomfort. Yet modern culture trains people to avoid discomfort at all costs. Immediate pleasure, instant convenience, constant stimulation, and slowly people lose resilience. Then ordinary challenges begin feeling overwhelming. This is why emotional strength matters financially. Can you stay calm during uncertainty? Can you think clearly under pressure? Can you continue building during slow seasons? Those abilities create enormous long-term advantages because many people quit emotionally long before failure actually happens. Now, here's another truth most people never hear. You do not need to eliminate fear to build wealth. You need to stop worshiping it. Fear should inform awareness, not control direction. And some fear is actually healthy. Fear can encourage preparation, encourage learning, encourage strategic thinking. But when fear becomes paralysis, life begins shrinking around it. That's why wealthy builders often become deeply action-oriented, not impulsive, responsive. They understand momentum matters psychologically. Small action interrupts helplessness. One step creates evidence. Evidence creates confidence. Confidence creates larger action, and gradually, identity transforms. This is why staying stuck too long becomes dangerous emotionally. Inaction weakens self-trust. Every promise you break to yourself teaches your mind that your words hold little authority, and once self-trust erodes, discipline becomes harder. But every small commitment honored rebuilds identity. Wake up earlier consistently, self-trust grows. Save money consistently, self-trust grows. Learn daily, self-trust grows. Follow through repeatedly, self-respect deepens. This matters more than people realize, because disciplined people are not necessarily superhuman. They simply build stronger relationships with their own word. Now let me tell you something deeply important. Your environment either strengthens courage or strengthens fear. If you surround yourself with chronic negativity, limitation begins feeling normal. People who mock ambition, mock discipline, mock growth, mock risk. Those environments quietly suffocate expansion, because humans adapt psychologically to repeated emotional climates. That's why protecting your environment matters. The conversations you absorb, the content you consume, the energy surrounding your life, everything influences belief, and belief influences action. Now here's one of the most powerful mindset shifts regarding wealth. Stop asking. Quote, 18, start asking. Quote, 19. That question changes people, because many individuals are not actually afraid of failure. They're afraid of exposure. Exposure of inadequacy. Exposure of imperfection. Exposure of uncertainty. But perfection is not required for progress. Movement is, and movement creates opportunities impossible to predict beforehand. Most life-changing opportunities begin invisible. A conversation, a skill learned, a side project, a connection, a single disciplined habit. Tiny beginnings often create massive future outcomes. That's why courageous people eventually experience realities fearful people never encounter. Not because they are luckier, because they moved. Now understand this carefully. The wealth escape plan is not about abandoning stability recklessly. It's about expanding capability strategically until fear no longer controls your options. That may mean building additional income streams slowly, developing high-value skills after work, learning investment principles gradually, creating digital leverage patiently. Freedom grows layer by layer, and every layer reduces emotional dependence on survival fear. That changes a person profoundly, because once people stop living entirely from fear, their creativity expands, their confidence expands, their clarity expands, and expansion changes destiny. Now here's something most people never consider. Many wealthy individuals are simply people who became comfortable with temporary uncertainty, while everyone else demanded immediate certainty. Think about that carefully. The ability to tolerate uncertainty may be one of the highest paid emotional skills on earth. Entrepreneurs tolerate uncertainty. Investors tolerate uncertainty. Creators tolerate uncertainty. Builders tolerate uncertainty. Meanwhile, many people remain trapped because they emotionally require guarantees before movement. But guarantees rarely exist in meaningful growth. Only probabilities, preparation, adaptation, persistence, and courage. Always courage. If this message resonates deeply with you, let it become a turning point. Not just emotional inspiration, a decision to stop allowing fear to design your future quietly. Because your life deserves more than survival dictated by invisible anxieties. And in the next chapter, we are going to uncover one of the greatest wealth-building secrets hidden in plain sight. Why some people seem to move through opportunities almost magnetically, while others stay stuck despite effort. The answer has less to do with luck than most people think. It has everything to do with value. Chapter 7. The world pays for value, not effort alone. This realization changes everything once it truly sinks into your mind. Most people were raised believing money comes primarily from hard work. So they spend years increasing effort without increasing value, and eventually they become exhausted, wondering why life still feels financially heavy. But the modern economy operates differently than most people emotionally understand. Effort matters, discipline matters, consistency matters, but value multiplied by leverage changes lives. And here's the important distinction. Value is not about being busy. Value is about usefulness. Can you solve problems? Can you improve outcomes? Can you save people time? Can you reduce stress? Can you create clarity? Can you entertain, educate, organize, simplify, build, guide, innovate? Because the marketplace rewards usefulness repeatedly. Now, listen carefully. Many people stay financially stuck because they focus only on earning. Instead of becoming more valuable, they ask, how can I make more money? Instead of asking, how can I become more useful to the world? That second question creates transformation because when capability expands, opportunities expand too, and capability compounds. One valuable skill opens doors. Several valuable skills create leverage. Rare combinations create freedom. This is why learning matters so much now. Not passive information addiction, applied learning, practical capability. The modern world changes too fast for stagnant thinking. People who continuously adapt gain enormous advantages over time, especially in the age of AI, automation, and digital systems. Now, here's something most people misunderstand about wealthy individuals. Many are not necessarily the smartest people in every room. They simply understand value creation better. They understand attention, human psychology, distribution, systems, problem solving, and most importantly, they understand scale. A teacher helping one student creates value. A digital course helping millions scales value. A local service creates value. Software automating the service globally scales value. This is why technology changed wealth creation permanently. One person today can create disproportionate impact through leverage, but only if they stop thinking purely in terms of labor. Now understand this deeply. Your income often reflects the scale of problems you can solve consistently. That's why emotional intelligence matters financially. Communication matters financially. Leadership matters financially. Adaptability matters financially. Because human beings pay for transformation. People pay to save time, save stress, gain clarity, gain status, gain health, gain confidence, gain results. Once you understand this, you stop viewing money emotionally. You begin viewing it structurally. Money often flows toward value exchange, and people who focus obsessively on increasing usefulness tend to expand financially over time. Now here's another important shift. Stop asking. Quote_22. Start asking. Quote_23. That question creates resilience because industries evolve. Platforms evolve, technology evolves, but certain human capabilities continue increasing in value. Focus, communication, strategic thinking, emotional stability, creativity, leadership, adaptability, sales, problem solving. These abilities compound across industries. and people possessing them become increasingly difficult to replace. This matters deeply now because the future belongs less to people with static credentials and more to people who continuously evolve. Now here's where many people sabotage themselves. They consume motivation endlessly without building capability. They feel inspired temporarily, but never develop rare value. And inspiration without execution changes nothing. This is why the Wealth Escape Plan emphasizes structure over hype. You cannot motivational video your way into freedom permanently. You need systems, skills, discipline, long-term thinking. Real wealth is usually built through repeated, intelligent behavior over time, not emotional intensity. Now let me tell you something uncomfortable. Many people secretly want rewards without becoming reward-worthy first. They want extraordinary outcomes while maintaining ordinary discipline, but life rarely works that way. Your habits reveal your priorities more honestly than your goals do. And if someone spends years avoiding learning, avoiding growth, avoiding responsibility, they eventually become economically fragile. Because the world increasingly rewards adaptability. Now think about this carefully. A person with strong communication skills, emotional discipline, technological literacy, and strategic thinking can rebuild income almost anywhere. That is real security. Not dependence on one employer, not dependence on one platform, not dependence on one fragile identity. Capability creates resilience, and resilience creates confidence. This is why wealthy thinkers often invest heavily in themselves first, not from ego, from understanding. Skills generate returns for decades. Knowledge compounds. Discipline compounds. Networks compound. Reputation compounds. Everything meaningful compounds. But compounding requires consistency long before visible results appear. And this is where emotionally impatient people self-sabotage. They quit too early. They expect immediate rewards from activities whose true value emerges years later. Reading, learning, building, investing, creating. All of these often feel small initially, but over long periods, they become life-changing. Now here's another dangerous modern trap. People compare their beginnings to someone else's visible middle. Social media intensified this massively. You see someone's success, but not the decade of invisible preparation behind it, the sacrifices, the failures, the uncertainty, the repetition. So people become discouraged too quickly. They assume they are behind permanently. But life is not linear. A focused 5 years can completely transform someone's trajectory. The problem is, most people cannot sustain focus long enough. Distraction interrupts compounding constantly, and distraction has become normalized. People consume endless content about success while avoiding the discomfort of building it. But builders understand something consumers often don't. Information only matters when translated into action. Knowledge unused becomes entertainment. Execution creates outcomes. Now here's a powerful question. What would happen if you spent the next 3 years obsessively developing valuable capabilities instead of obsessively consuming distractions? Think about that seriously. 3 focused years, 3 disciplined years, 3 intentional years. Your identity would change. Your confidence would change. Your opportunities would change. Most people dramatically underestimate what consistent effort can produce over time because they are conditioned to expect instant transformation. But meaningful growth often feels slow daily and shocking yearly. That's how compounding works. Now let me tell you something deeply important. The goal is not merely to make money. The goal is to become someone capable of generating value repeatedly under changing conditions. That creates long-term freedom. Because external circumstances fluctuate, economies shift, industries evolve, platforms disappear, but adaptable people rebuild again and again. This is why mindset matters financially, not fake positivity, mental flexibility. Can you learn continuously? Can you evolve without ego? Can you remain calm while adapting? That emotional stability becomes a massive advantage during uncertain times. Now, here's another hidden truth. Wealth building often requires becoming comfortable being a beginner repeatedly, learning new skills, testing new systems, exploring unfamiliar environments. Ego resists this. Ego wants immediate mastery, but growth requires temporary incompetence. And humble learners often outperform arrogant experts long-term because they continue evolving. Never stop learning, especially now. The pace of change is accelerating globally, and those who refuse adaptation will increasingly struggle emotionally and financially. Now think carefully about the next decade. AI will automate many repetitive tasks. Attention economies will intensify. Digital leverage will continue expanding. The people who thrive will likely possess a combination of human depth and technological adaptability, creativity with discipline, strategy with emotional intelligence, systems thinking with focus. This is why your future remains more flexible than fear tells you. You are not trapped permanently unless you stop evolving, and evolution begins with awareness. Awareness of where value is going, where attention is going, where the world is moving. Now here's the beautiful part. You do not need to become someone else completely. You simply need to expand what you're already capable of becoming. One skill at a time, one habit at a time, one disciplined season at a time. Tiny improvements compound into powerful identities, and identity shapes destiny more than most people realize. If this chapter resonated deeply, don't just feel inspired for a few minutes. Reflect honestly. What value are you building? What skills are you developing? What future are your current routines quietly constructing? Because your future income often hides inside your present habits. And in the next chapter, we're going to uncover why emotional control may be one of the most underrated wealth-building skills in the modern world. Because many people don't lose financially from lack of opportunity. They lose emotionally long before money disappears. Dear friend, you are definitely on the right track if you're watching this video. Like, subscribe, and write in the comments which topic or problem concerns you the most. We promise to prepare a professional video explanation at your request. Chapter 8. Emotional control is financial power. Most people think wealth is built only through intelligence. But if intelligence alone created freedom, emotionally unstable geniuses would dominate the world financially. They don't. Because money magnifies emotional patterns, and emotional instability is expensive, very expensive. People lose fortunes through panic, lose opportunities through insecurity, lose relationships through ego, lose focus through distraction, lose years through impulsive decisions. That's why emotional discipline quietly separates builders from self-saboteurs. Now understand something deeply important. The modern world profits from emotional reactivity. Fear sells, outrage spreads, impulse purchases generate billions. Comparison drives endless consumption. If your emotions are easily manipulated, Your decisions become easily manipulated too, and manipulated decisions create fragile lives. This is why calmness has become a competitive advantage. Can you think clearly when others panic? Can you stay patient while others react emotionally? Can you remain disciplined when dopamine culture demands instant gratification? That emotional steadiness compounds financially over time. Now think about investing for a moment. Many people intellectually understand basic principles. Save consistently, invest long-term. Avoid emotional decisions. Simple, but emotionally difficult. Why? Because human beings are not naturally rational under pressure. When markets fall, fear appears. When trends explode, greed appears. When uncertainty increases, panic spreads. And emotional people make expensive decisions. This pattern exists everywhere beyond investing too. Business, careers, relationships, leadership. Emotionally reactive individuals struggle to sustain long-term progress because every difficult season feels catastrophic. But builders understand something powerful. Temporary discomfort is not permanent failure, and this mindset changes everything, because all meaningful growth includes emotional turbulence, slow seasons, doubt, uncertainty, invisible progress. If someone interprets every difficult moment as evidence to quit, they rarely compound anything successfully. Now here's another hidden truth. Many people are financially trapped because they use money emotionally instead of strategically. They spend to feel important, spend to escape stress, spend to impress others, spend impulsively during emotional lows. Money becomes emotional medication instead of intentional leverage, and emotional spending creates invisible chains. This is why self-awareness matters so much. What emotional state controls your financial behavior? Stress? Insecurity? Loneliness? Comparison? Fear? Because unconscious emotions quietly shape financial destiny. And most people never examine this deeply. They simply repeat patterns inherited from family, culture, and environment. But awareness interrupts unconscious cycles. Now let me tell you something transformative. Financial freedom begins emotionally before it appears materially. The moment someone stops needing constant external validation, their spending changes. The moment someone develops patience, their investing changes. The moment someone values peace over appearance, their priorities change. Internal evolution creates external alignment, and alignment creates momentum. Now think carefully about how modern culture conditions emotional instability. Constant comparison through social media, constant urgency through notifications, constant stimulation through entertainment, constant outrage through news cycles. Human nervous systems were never designed for non-stop digital overwhelm. That's why so many people feel mentally exhausted despite doing little physically demanding work. Their attention never rests, and exhausted minds make poor decisions. This is why wealthy thinkers often protect stillness aggressively. Morning routines, deep work periods, walks without phones, meditation, journaling, reflection. Not because these habits are trendy, because clarity matters, and clarity requires space. A constantly overstimulated mind struggles to think strategically long-term. Now here's a powerful realization. Every emotional reaction costs energy. Resentment costs energy. Comparison costs energy. Drama costs energy. People-pleasing costs energy. And energy is life currency. Where your emotional energy flows, your future eventually follows. This is why emotional boundaries matter financially too. If you constantly absorb chaos from unstable environments, your focus weakens, your creativity weakens, your consistency weakens, and consistency builds wealth, not occasional intensity, steady execution. Now listen carefully. One of the greatest financial advantages in life is becoming difficult to emotionally destabilize. Imagine how powerful that becomes. While others panic, you think clearly. While others react impulsively, you stay strategic. While others chase trends emotionally, you remain grounded. That emotional steadiness compounds into better decisions repeatedly. And better decisions shape entire futures. Now here's another uncomfortable truth. Many people sabotage opportunities because success itself triggers unresolved emotional patterns. Fear of visibility, fear of responsibility, fear of outgrowing old identities, fear of judgment. So they procrastinate, self-sabotage, delay, distract themselves, not because they lack ability, because internally they still associate expansion with danger. This is why inner work matters, because wealth building is not merely financial mechanics, it's psychological evolution. You must become someone emotionally capable of holding greater responsibility without collapsing into chaos. That means learning, patience, discipline, delayed gratification, self-regulation, resilience. And resilience may be one of the rarest modern traits now. People are overstimulated and undertrained emotionally. So ordinary challenges feel overwhelming. But strong minds are built intentionally, not accidentally, and every difficult season can either strengthen you or emotionally weaken you, depending on how you respond. Now think about this carefully. When pressure enters your life, what emerges from you? Impulsiveness, blame, panic, avoidance, or clarity, adaptability, discipline, composure. Pressure reveals identity. That's why wealthy builders often become obsessed with controlling internal states, because internal chaos eventually creates external chaos. Now here's something deeply powerful. Emotional control is not emotional suppression. You are allowed to feel fear, feel doubt, feel sadness, feel frustration. The goal is not becoming robotic. The goal is preventing emotions from controlling direction permanently. Feel emotions, acknowledge emotions, but do not surrender your future to temporary emotional weather. This changes everything, because life will challenge you repeatedly. Unexpected bills, failures, disappointments, slow progress, uncertainty, and emotionally fragile people collapse under pressures. Emotionally strong people navigate strategically. Strength matters. Now here's another important shift. Delayed gratification is one of the highest return financial skills on earth. Can you sacrifice temporary pleasure for future freedom? Most people struggle deeply with this because modern culture monetizes impatience. Buy now, watch now, consume now, react now. But wealth compounds through patience, saving consistently, investing consistently, learning consistently, building consistently. The future rewards those willing to endure temporary discomfort for long-term expansion. And this principle applies everywhere beyond money too. Health, relationships, mental clarity, personal growth. Short-term impulses create long-term consequences. Long-term thinking creates long-term peace. Now let me tell you something beautiful. The strongest people are often not the loudest. They're the calmest. The people who learn not to panic during storms. The people who learn not to quit during uncertainty. The people who learn to protect focus while the world became noisy. Calmness is power, especially now. Now, imagine your future self 5 years from today. Emotionally disciplined, financially intentional, focused, grounded, clear-minded, not easily manipulated by trends, fear, or external chaos. That version of you is possible, but it requires training, daily training, because mental strength is built through repetition exactly like physical strength, one disciplined decision at a time. And if this chapter resonates deeply with you, remember this sentence. Your emotions are temporary visitors. Do not let them become permanent architects of your life. That line alone can save people years of regret. Now, in the next chapter, we are going to explore one of the greatest hidden wealth killers in modern society, comparison. Because many people are not building their own lives anymore. They're performing versions of success designed to impress strangers. And that performance quietly destroys freedom. Chapter 9. Comparison is quietly destroying people's lives. There was a time when human beings compared themselves to a small circle, neighbors, friends, family, co-workers. Now people compare themselves to millions every day, and their nervous systems were never designed for it. Every scroll becomes psychological warfare. Someone else's success, someone else's body, someone else's relationship, someone else's luxury lifestyle, someone else's highlight reel. And little by little, people begin losing connection with their own path. This is one of the greatest hidden tragedies of the digital age. People are no longer living intentionally. They're performing productivity, performing happiness, performing success, performing importance. And performance is exhausting. Because when your life becomes centered around external validation, peace disappears. Now listen carefully. Comparison does not inspire most people. It destabilizes them. It creates insecurity, impatience, envy, self-doubt, financial irresponsibility. Because people begin making decisions emotionally instead of intentionally. They buy things they don't need to feel significant temporarily. They chase status instead of freedom. They pursue appearance instead of alignment. And slowly, their authentic life disappears beneath social performance. This is why many people earn more money than previous generations, yet feel more anxious than ever. They are trapped inside invisible social pressure 24 hours a day, always comparing, always measuring, always feeling behind. But here's the truth nobody says loudly enough. You cannot build a meaningful life while constantly studying everyone else's. Attention is finite. Every moment spent obsessing over another person's timeline steals energy from your own development. And your development deserves your full focus. Now, understand something deeply important. The internet distorted people's perception of reality. You now see extraordinary outcomes constantly. Extreme wealth, extreme beauty, extreme lifestyles, extreme success stories. But what you rarely see are ordinary realities. Debt, stress, loneliness, burnout, anxiety, years of invisible struggle. So people compare their full reality to another person's edited presentation. That comparison becomes emotionally toxic, and emotional toxicity destroys focus. Now, here's another hidden problem. Comparison accelerates impatience. People no longer want gradual growth. They want immediate transformation because social media compresses years into seconds. You see the result, but not the repetition behind it, not the lonely mornings, not the sacrifices, not the uncertainty, not the failures. So people begin expecting unrealistic timelines for their own growth. And unrealistic expectations create discouragement. But real wealth building often looks boring externally. Consistent learning, consistent saving, consistent building, consistent discipline, no viral moment, no dramatic overnight transformation, just steady, intentional progress. And because this process lacks entertainment value, many people abandon it. They return to distraction instead. Now let me tell you something powerful. The people most likely to achieve meaningful freedom are often the least interested in performing success publicly. Because performers prioritize appearance, builders prioritize reality. A performer wants to look wealthy. A builder wants to become free. There is a massive difference. One spends money signaling status. The other invests money creating options. One seeks attention. The other seeks leverage. One depends emotionally on external approval. The other depends on internal alignment. And over time, those paths lead to radically different outcomes. Now here's something many people never realize. Comparison also destroys gratitude, and gratitude matters psychologically more than people understand. Not fake positivity, grounded appreciation. Because when someone constantly focuses on what they lack, they begin feeling perpetually inadequate regardless of achievement. Nothing becomes enough. More money won't fix that. More status won't fix that. More followers won't fix that. Internal emptiness simply scales externally. That's why wealthy people without inner peace often remain emotionally restless. They never learned contentment. And contentment is not the same as complacency. You can desire growth while remaining grateful simultaneously. In fact, gratitude often creates better growth because emotionally grounded people make clearer decisions. Now think carefully about your own life. How many goals are truly yours? And how many were inherited unconsciously from culture, comparison, or social expectation? The luxury car, the prestigious title, the image of success, the performative lifestyle. Did you genuinely choose those desires, or were they downloaded into your mind through repeated exposure? This question matters deeply because many people spend decades climbing ladders they never consciously chose. Then one day, they arrive exhausted, only to realize the destination feels empty. That realization hurts, especially after sacrificing years chasing external validation instead of internal alignment. This is why clarity matters more than image. What do you actually want your life to feel like? Peaceful, flexible, creative, purposeful, grounded, free? Start there, not with trends, not with comparison, not with performative ambition, with truth. Because truthful goals create sustainable motivation. False goals create burnout. Now here's another dangerous effect of comparison. It makes people underestimate their own progress constantly. Someone improves dramatically, but still feels behind because they compare upward endlessly. This destroys confidence psychologically. And confidence matters financially, not arrogance. Self-trust, the belief that your effort matters, that your growth matters, that your path deserves patience too. Without self-trust, people sabotage consistency. They quit too early because someone else appears ahead temporarily. But life is not a synchronized race. People begin at different places, move through different struggles, carry different responsibilities, develop at different speeds. Your timeline is allowed to look different. Now listen carefully to this next sentence. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 25, underscore, underscore. That line describes modern culture perfectly. People curate lifestyles while secretly drowning emotionally. And many are too afraid to admit it because image became identity. But freedom begins the moment you stop performing your life and start building it intentionally instead. Now here's something deeply powerful. Silence protects growth. Not every goal needs announcement. Not every move needs validation. Not every dream needs public exposure. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is disappear quietly for a season and build. Study, learn, heal, save, create, focus, without needing applause every step of the way. Because applause can become addictive too, and addicted people struggle to hear themselves clearly. Now think about nature for a moment. Seeds grow underground first, invisible, quiet, uncelebrated. Roots develop before fruit appears. Human transformation often works similarly. The deepest growth phases are usually invisible publicly. Protect those seasons. Do not rush your becoming simply because the world rewards visibility more than depth. Depth lasts longer. Now here's another important truth. The people constantly broadcasting success often aren't necessarily the freest. Sometimes the freest individuals are barely visible online at all, living peacefully, building intentionally, protecting energy, owning time, maintaining clarity. Real freedom often becomes quieter with maturity, because emotionally secure people stop needing constant external confirmation. And emotional security changes financial behavior dramatically. You stop buying to impress. Stop competing unnecessarily. Stop chasing status games designed to drain attention and money. Instead, you build calmly, and calm builders compound powerfully over time. Now imagine what happens when you remove comparison from your daily emotional environment. Suddenly, your goals become clearer. Your gratitude deepens. Your anxiety decreases. Your focus strengthens. You stop wasting energy measuring your life against illusions. And finally, you can hear your own direction again. That matters, because deep down, most people already know what kind of life they truly want. They've just been distracted away from themselves for too long. If this chapter resonated deeply, maybe it's time to reclaim your attention fully, not from ambition, from noise, because your future deserves more than fragmented focus and emotional comparison loops. And in the next chapter, we're going to uncover one of the most misunderstood truths about discipline. Why disciplined people are not necessarily stronger than everyone else. They simply learned how to stop negotiating with themselves. Chapter 10. Stop negotiating with your future. Most people think disciplined individuals wake up every morning overflowing with motivation. They don't. They simply learned something powerful. Feelings are unreliable. Standards are not. And this single realization changes lives, because the average person negotiates constantly with their own future. I'll start tomorrow. I'll do it later. I deserve a break. One more hour won't matter. Maybe next week. And one negotiation becomes a habit. Then the habit becomes identity. Eventually, people no longer trust themselves because they break too many promises internally. This is one of the greatest hidden costs of undisciplined living. It weakens self-respect. Now listen carefully. Every time you ignore a commitment to yourself, your mind records it. Every delayed action, every abandoned routine, every excuse repeated consistently. Your subconscious begins learning, my words don't mean much. And once self-trust weakens, everything becomes harder. Focus becomes harder. Consistency becomes harder. Confidence becomes harder, because confidence is not built through affirmations alone. Confidence is built through evidence. evidence that you follow through, evidence that you endure discomfort, evidence that you keep moving when emotions fluctuate. This is why discipline creates freedom while impulsiveness creates fragility. Now understand this deeply. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is self-respect in action. It's the decision to protect your future from your temporary moods. And moods are temporary. Everyone feels tired sometimes. Everyone feels doubt sometimes. Everyone loses motivation sometimes. But disciplined people continue anyway. Not perfectly, consistently, and consistency compounds into identity. Now here's something powerful. The people who transform their lives are usually not superhuman. They simply stop negotiating with basic standards. They decide, I will train, I will learn, I will save, I will build, I will improve, regardless of emotional weather. That creates momentum, and momentum changes psychology dramatically. Because movement creates energy. Action interrupts stagnation. Most people wait to feel different before changing behavior. But behavior often changes feelings first. You start moving. Then motivation follows. You start learning. Then confidence grows. You start building. Then clarity appears. Action creates emotional momentum. Now think about how many people remain trapped in cycles because they constantly negotiate with discomfort. The alarm rings. Negotiation begins. A difficult conversation appears. Negotiation begins. A new skill feels frustrating. Negotiation begins. Saving money requires sacrifice. Negotiation begins. And every time comfort wins automatically, future freedom loses quietly. That's the real cost. Not just lost productivity, lost potential. Now here's another important truth. Discipline reduces suffering long term. Undisciplined living creates invisible chaos, financial chaos, health chaos, emotional chaos, relationship chaos. Because avoiding small discomforts usually creates larger pain later. Skipping workouts eventually damages health. Avoiding financial responsibility creates debt stress. Ignoring emotional growth damages relationships. Delaying learning weakens opportunity. Small disciplines prevent large crises. This is why mature people learn to embrace necessary discomfort early instead of unavoidable pain later. Now listen carefully to this sentence. Easy choices create hard lives. Hard choices create easier lives. That principle appears everywhere, not instantly, eventually, because life compounds behavior. Now here's where discipline becomes even more powerful financially. Disciplined people create reliability, and reliability builds trust. Employers trust reliability. Clients trust reliability. Teams trust reliability. Partners trust reliability. And trust creates opportunities. This is one reason. Disciplined individuals often advance steadily over time, not because they are perfect, because people know they follow through. That matters enormously. Now here's another hidden truth. Discipline protects mental health more than people realize. Why? Because chaos creates anxiety. Unfinished responsibilities create mental noise. Disorganization creates stress. Constant procrastination creates guilt. But structure creates clarity. You know what matters. You know what needs attention. You know where your energy goes. And clarity reduces overwhelm. Now think carefully about your own life. What areas create recurring stress because discipline is absent? Finances, health, focus, sleep, learning, time management. Most suffering contains repeated patterns somewhere underneath it, and repeated patterns require intentional systems to change. Not temporary motivation, systems. This is why wealthy builders often simplify life aggressively. Simple routines, simple habits, simple priorities. Because complexity drains energy, and drained people struggle to build consistently. Now, here's another major shift. Discipline is easier when identity changes. If someone sees exercise as punishment, consistency feels painful. But if someone sees themselves as a healthy person, behavior aligns more naturally. If someone sees saving money as deprivation, financial discipline feels emotionally heavy. But if someone sees themselves as a future-focused builder, saving becomes self-respect. Identity drives behavior more powerfully than willpower alone. This is why transformation must happen internally too. You are not merely forcing actions, you are becoming someone different gradually. And becoming requires repetition. Now let me tell you something deeply important. Your environment either strengthens discipline or destroys it. Constant distractions weaken focus. Negative relationships weaken standards. Chaotic routines weaken consistency. This is why intentional people design supportive environments. They reduce temptation, reduce noise, reduce friction. Because relying purely on willpower eventually fails. Smart systems outperform emotional effort long term. For example, automatic savings, scheduled workouts, planned learning sessions, focused work environments. Systems protect progress when emotions fluctuate, and emotions always fluctuate. Now here's something modern culture misunderstands badly. Discipline is not the enemy of freedom. It is the path to it. Undisciplined people often become controlled by impulses, debt, distractions, addictions, and emotional instability. Disciplined people create options. Options to rest, options to leave toxic environments, options to think long-term, options to protect peace. Freedom without discipline collapses quickly. Now think about this carefully. Every future version of you is waiting on today's decisions. The healthier version, the wealthier version, the calmer version, the more capable version. That person is built through repetition, daily repetition, not dramatic breakthroughs. And this is beautiful because it means transformation is accessible, not easy, accessible. One better decision repeated consistently changes identity over time. Now here's another powerful realization. Discipline creates pride, quiet pride, the kind that comes from knowing you kept your word to yourself. That feeling matters deeply because self-respect changes posture, changes energy, changes standards. People who respect themselves stop tolerating environments that destroy them. They stop settling emotionally, stop drifting passively, stop abandoning their future repeatedly for temporary comfort. Now listen carefully. Your future does not need a perfect version of you. It needs a consistent one, a version willing to continue imperfectly instead of quitting emotionally. That is enough, more than enough. Now imagine yourself 5 years from now if you stopped negotiating with your future starting today. Imagine the compounded effect. Daily learning, daily discipline, daily focus, daily intentionality. Your mind would sharpen, your finances would strengthen, your confidence would deepen, your opportunities would expand. Because consistency transforms ordinary people into extraordinary examples over time, not overnight, over time, and time will pass anyway. That's the powerful part. 5 years from now will arrive whether you build intentionally or drift unconsciously. So the real question becomes, who will you become while time keeps moving? If this chapter hit deeply, let it become more than inspiration. Let it become a line in the sand, a moment where you stop bargaining away your future one excuse at a time, because your life deserves stronger standards than temporary moods. And in the next chapter, we are going to explore one of the greatest hidden advantages wealthy people develop: the ability to think long-term in a world addicted to immediacy, because short-term thinking quietly destroys millions of futures every single year. Chapter 11, The Rich Think in Decades. Most people think in days. This is one of the biggest differences between people who eventually create freedom and people who remain trapped in cycles forever. Time horizon. The average person thinks emotionally short-term, but builders ask different questions, and those questions create radically different lives over time. Now, understand something important. Independent thinking matters enormously now. Can you question trends? Question assumptions? Question inherited definitions of success? Because if you never think independently, you may spend your life chasing goals designed by other people, and that leads to emptiness eventually. Now listen carefully to this next sentence. Underscore, underscore, quote underscore 64, underscore, underscore. That line explains almost everything. Powerful lives require focus, intentionality, depth, reflection, not endless stimulation. Now here's another truth. Your attention is your life. Wherever your attention repeatedly goes, your future gradually follows. Protect it accordingly. Now, if this chapter resonates deeply, maybe tonight is the night you create more silence in your life intentionally. Less noise, less reaction, less digital chaos, more depth, more awareness, more clarity. Because your future deserves an undistracted mind capable of building something meaningful. And in the next chapter, we are going to explore why many people remain trapped financially, not because they lack money, but because they never learned how to think strategically about risk. And until you understand risk properly, fear will continue controlling your decisions silently.